Just a few moments here. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, so today I have the fortunate opportunity of speaking with Dr. Sara Lazar, who is an associate researcher in the psychiatry department at Massachusetts General Hospital and an assistant professor in psychology at Harvard Medical School. Her research has been covered by numerous news outlets, including the New York Times, USA Today, CNN, WebMD, and her work has been featured in a display at the Boston Museum of Science. Her viral TEDx talk, How Meditation Can Reshape Our Brains, has been viewed over 1.4 million times online. And today we're going to be discussing with her the fascinating discoveries she has made with her study of the neuroscience of meditation. So thank you again, Sara, for coming on. This is a great opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I would first like to start with asking you, could you tell us a bit of your background in terms of how you became interested in researching like the neuroscience of meditation? How did that come across for you?
Yeah, no, so I've been doing yoga and meditation for about 25 years now, and back,
Oh,
probably actually a little more than that now. And so I used to be a runner, and I developed knee and back pain, and they told me I had to stop running and just stretch. The physical therapist
mhm.
did. And as I was leaving the physical therapist office, I happened to see an ad for a yoga class. And so I thought, okay, this will be a way to just stretch, but stay in shape because it's a vigorous yoga class. And at that point, I equated yoga with tinfoil hats, and magic crystals. I did not
Yeah.
believe them. I was very, very, very skeptical. So I went to it purely as a form of physical therapy. But after a couple classes, it was really clear that there was something to this, that I was calmer, I was less reactive, I was just seeing things in a very different way. And I've been a runner for many years. I knew it wasn't just exercise. I always stretched before and after I ran. So I knew it wasn't just stretching. There was something that was different. And so I never went back to running. I just stuck with yoga. And then as I finished up my PhD, I decided I wanted to switch and just to devote my research to studying this topic.
Hmm. Wow, that's incredible. I feel like a lot of people, especially in the United States, who don't really have parents or a lot of friends who are into these kinds of things, that they come across these exercises like yoga and meditation in very interesting ways. For
Yeah.
me personally, I was taking a lot of prescription drugs. This is what doctors were prescribing me, and I didn't honestly want to continue taking them, but where I lived, there were no obvious alternatives. There weren't really a whole lot of yoga and meditation places that people could go to, um, and also it was as if I was being told. Well, I really was being told that it was okay to be taking as many drugs as I was taking. I was taking a
Mm,
lot
mm,
every day, and it just got to a point where I realized I was willing to do anything to get off of these drugs. And that's when I did some research and I found out about meditation being possibly a good alternative for prescription drugs with the
yeah.
reason I was prescribed them, which was for ADHD. And
Hmm.
uh, and so, I ultimately met a doctor, and she was a psychiatrist, but she helped me. She taught me meditation, and that was such a, gigantic transformation that I went through to go from taking so many drugs into now, practicing meditation and, learning so much more about myself and the world around me through this exercise, that I just wanted to be able to help other people who might be going through the same thing in whatever way that I can. And that's a huge reason why I wanted to, interview somebody like you, because, you have, you are a professor at one of the most prestigious schools in the entire world, and
Yeah.
and that's I think it's going to help a lot of people to hear this information coming from somebody who has such a very strong scientific background as you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so if you could, I would love for you to talk about a little of the study that you did that you essentially spoke about with your TEDx talk. How meditation can reshape our brains. That's absolutely fascinating. And just in whatever words that you feel would be great, we would love to hear more about that.
sure. Yeah. So, so I'm actually going to back up for the first study. So the first study we did, actually going to back up even further. So
Great.
back when I first started doing this research, a couple of studies were done looking at the actual shape of the brain. So back with MRI, so back even before, long before there was MRI, like just neurosurgeons and people who had to cut open the skull and look at brains, they learned a couple of different things. So one was that as we get older, our brain actually starts to shrink.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, what they thought was interesting, what they found was like, so for instance, there's a part of the brain that is devoted to movement, right? And that is biggest in young, healthy people who go out and exercise a lot. And then as we get older, we become more sedentary, it actually gets smaller, right? So there's this, and then, but in athletes, professional athletes, it remains very, big and robust. And so this is really this idea, which makes sense. It's sort of just like any other muscle. If you use something, it's going to get well developed, and if it's not so well developed, it's going to shrink and shrivel. And so then once MRI came along, there were starting to be some studies demonstrating, for instance, one of the first studies was with musicians, showing that professional musicians have more gray matter than amateur musicians, and they have more gray matter than non-musicians in certain areas of the brain related to
Mm.
music. And then the study came along with juggling. So they scanned people who had never juggled before. They scanned them. They taught them how to juggle for 3 months. They scanned them a second time. Then they told them to stop juggling, and they scanned them again a few months later. And what they found was that part of the brain important for detecting visual motion actually got
Mm-hmm.
bigger over the course of the 3 months and then shrank again afterwards. So it really demonstrated very convincingly that the brain really is dynamic, and it really does grow and shrink as we learn and acquire new skills. So now I heard about that study and it's like, wow, okay, 3 months. And at the time, I was doing a study with long-term meditators who have been practicing for years. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
okay, could we see something? And so what we did, so it was long-term meditators and controls. And so we just compared the brains to say, okay, is there any differences in the brains? And we found that yes, there were several brain regions where there was more gray matter in the long-term meditators versus the controls. Great. Well, no, a lot of people got a lot of pushback. Well, maybe people who were likely to meditate, maybe they were just bigger to begin with, right? So if you have more gray matter in certain brain regions, then you're just more likely to start meditating or stick with meditation. And that's legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't do that. But I thought about it again. I thought those jugglers, they practiced for 3 months. And in the meditation world, there's these 8-week programs. The first one was called mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it's an 8-week program where you practice 40 minutes in class each week, but then you're also told to go home and practice 40 minutes. You have mindfulness every day. And, people go through those programs and say, oh my God, these programs changed my life. And they really report stress reduction and, just totally new people. So I thought, okay, behaviorally something's happening in 2 months. Could we actually show changes in the brain in 2 months? And so
Mm-hmm.
that was a study we did that got it's got a lot of attention. And it was part of the TED,
Yeah.
the basis of my TED talk. And so basically, so we took people who had never practiced before and we scanned them, and then they either went through an 8-week meditation class or we just scanned them 8 weeks apart and didn't do anything in between. And we showed that in just 8 weeks, there was an increase in certain brain regions in the mindfulness
Wow.
compared to the controls. Right. And so what brain regions change? So just like the juggling study, that they're, you learn something new, the part of the brain responsible for doing that is going to grow. When the main regions we saw changing was the hippocampus, which is important for learning and memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's also actually very important for depression. So they know that, it tends to be smaller in people with depression, and that it responds to SSRIs and to antidepressant medications. And the sides of it tends to co-vary with changes in depression symptoms. There's a hippocampus. There's another region called the posterior cingulate, which is involved in mind wandering and self-related processes. And those two regions together are the regions that are most impacted by Alzheimer's disease. And then a third region called the temporal parietal junction, or the TPJ. And those three regions together are something called the default mode network, which is a set of brain regions that are on when nothing else in particular is happening. And so it's pretty cool that those regions, and since then, other people have shown that activity in this network changes with practice, and that the changes are long lasting. So it's not just activity gets turned off when you meditate, and then also activity remains low even when you're not meditating. And this idea is so that you're less mind wandering, more in the moment, is what this data is showing. And so then the structural changes suggest that this is how it's happening, is because they're being rewired. This is why they're being less active. So that was all really cool. And then the other region we found was the amygdala. The amygdala got smaller, and the change in the amygdala correlated with changes in stress. So the more stress reduction people reported, the smaller their amygdala was. And so that really helped demonstrate that the stress reduction wasn't just because people, time had passed, or people just want to say, hey, I'm feeling less stress, that there were actually, neurobiological reasons why they're experiencing less stress.
Wow, I mean, that is like literally mind blowing to hear how much a practice like that can influence our brains. The fascinating aspect of it for me is that to somebody from an outsider's perspective, they might be just watching somebody, sitting quietly or sitting in a chair, cross-legged or however that they're practicing, and they're not really doing a whole lot, especially with a mindfulness practice. It's almost complete silence.
Yeah.
Um, but that somehow turns into reshaping what is in our skulls. Like that is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's such an amazing time to be living in, to receive such incredible confirmation in the practice, like what you are doing, with your studies. That's, you know, it's hard to find words to describe how impactful that's going to be for the future of these studies, and how how much more motivation the scientific community can really get behind these studies now, knowing that there are some very significant changes that are taking place, even though what may on the surface seem to be happening is nothing particularly special.
Right. Exactly.
So yes, absolutely. And you just spoke about how musicians have certain parts of their brains that are more developed than professional musicians have certain parts of their brain that are more developed than beginner musicians, and then even more so than non-musicians,
Uh-huh.
which brings me to wonder, because I viewed a study of someone or a few, I think it was a group of people who practiced something called loving kindness meditation or
Yeah.
compassion meditation.
Uh-huh.
And that also influenced different parts of their brain that were correlated with these feelings of compassion inside of them, so that they were more naturally empathetic of other people. And
Mhm.
that is another thing that I think is fascinating. So it's as if there's a different outcome, structurally speaking, that each different type of meditation perhaps could create, possibly.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those studies, with the different types of meditation that influence different parts of our brains,
Right.
and what kind of, like, with the current world circumstances that we're surrounded by right now, what
Mhm.
do you think would be the most beneficial meditation practice for people to experience if they were to pick one to begin with, in your opinion?
Right. Okay. So the first part of the question is, okay, mindfulness versus compassion. I get this question a lot. I think exercise is a great uh, analogy. So it's sort of like running versus swimming versus playing golf versus, weightlifting versus, I don't know what. So we know that all the different types of yoga and meditation, because also these are just two types of meditation, right? So mindfulness versus
Hmm.
compassion, but there's also Tai Chi, there's yoga, there's mantra
Yeah.
meditation, and there's lots and lots of different types. Um,
Hmm.
so we know that just like all forms of exercise are generally beneficial, it seems
Hmm.
like all forms of yoga meditation are generally beneficial.
Hmm.
But then there's also sort of unique. So we know, for instance, like, weight training has, and weight bearing, is good for the joints versus, cardio versus, and so, and also, exactly which sets of muscles you're going to develop. And so similarly with the different types of the types of meditation and whatnot, you're going to, they're generally beneficial, but they are going to strengthen muscles differentially a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
and so right, and so you can't go wrong. I guess that's the main thing. So regardless of what you pick, you're going to have some benefits.
Hmm.
In terms of what's best, I think it has more to do with the person than the situation.
Hmm.
Some
Okay.
people, just like some people love to swim, some people hate to swim. Some people love mantra, some people hate mantra. Some people love compassion, some people, excuse me, not so much. So you
Yeah.
sort of have to try a few and sort of see, what you like. And so mindfulness is good. Um, and it's sort of a good basic place to start. And then, adding it. And I know a lot of people who will mix and match even within one session. Um,
Hmm.
right now, there's an actual 8-week program, just like there's mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's also a mindfulness-based self-compassion program.
Mm.
Yeah, and especially self-compassion, especially for, that's actually one I will say that. So people who, depression and anxiety and trauma, self-compassion is huge. I highly recommend self-compassion for those people just because so much of the inner self-talk is beating yourself up. So especially
Yeah.
if you are really hard on yourself, I highly
Yes.
recommend mindful self-compassion program because it really helps counter that talk. So just a straight mindfulness program would be good because we're saying, okay, hold on, there's that voice. You don't need to listen to that voice.
Uh-huh.
Let that voice just recede into the background and, let that happen. Versus the mindful self-compassion is that plus, okay, now what would you have wanted to have heard when you were a kid? What do you need to
Mm.
hear? And so what
Yeah.
do you say to yourself? Right. And so really, giving yourself a hug, so to speak. But doing
Yeah.
more to it than that. But I mean, that's sort of a big component of it is really, countering the negative self-talk in a really skillful way. So that's a really great place to start if you have a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative self-view, a lot of shame, a lot of doubt, these sorts of things. It's a really good place to start, and then take it from there.
Yeah, beautiful. I never actually knew about the mindfulness based compassion area that people can practice. And the way that you described that, that sounds like you know, pretty much almost anybody could benefit from that. And I mean, I even still, I'm definitely aware of, the voice inside my head that can from time to time, speak in a bit of an aggressive way, towards, myself, I guess you could say.
Uh-huh.
But I'm definitely aware of it. And that's something very interesting that I think I will personally check out that I
Yeah.
believe I could benefit from because, I
So,
mean, I
yeah.
think in the modern world, it's a very common thing for people to have these very aggressive voices inside their minds speak to them, for a multitude of reasons, whether or not it's their upbringing or society or the
Hmm.
people that they're just surrounded by. There's a multitude of reasons. And
Yeah.
so to me, I'm very grateful uh, that you described that and that you brought attention to that because I think that will help a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
So you also spoke about some of the long-term cognitive benefits of a
Hmm.
meditation practice, and I'm also very particularly interested in the effects that a meditation practice has as we get older and older.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been around a lot of monks, and there are some of them that are definitely later on in their years, but their minds, it's as if they're, still sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
And I also know many people who are nowhere near their age, and that they are beginning to cognitively decline. And
Yeah.
it just becomes more difficult to, have conversations because the subject might be forgotten, or
Right.
for a
Yeah.
multitude of reasons. So could you speak a little bit more about how meditation benefits people as they get older?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, we're just finishing up a study on that right now. Um,
Great.
so like you said, so it seems like mindfulness, you're just sitting there doing nothing. But what are you
Mhm.
actually doing? Right? So you're paying attention to your breath, and that's boring. So you're literally like inhale, exhale, and after about 10, 20, 30 seconds, little thoughts start to pop up in your head. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can sort of just, ignore those and they're sort of just there in the background, excuse me. But sometimes, you start getting engaged in them, right? And your mind starts to wander. And so,
Mhm.
but with practice, what you're doing is you're really trying to, it's called metacognitive awareness. And what that is sort of paying attention that, okay, I'm supposed to pay attention to my breath, but that little voice is talking. And so, okay, I have to remember to disengage from that voice, even if it says something really juicy and really like, oh my God, I have to go do this when I get done with meditation, or, oh my God, that thing that person said yesterday and made me so mad. Right. And so, okay, I'm not going to think about that right now. I'm just going to stick with my breath. But that thing that person said, oh my God. Right. And so,
Yeah.
you know, so can you, and sort of say, no, 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 not now, not now, just the breath, right? I'll deal with you later, right? And so that's the sort of
Mhm.
metacognitive awareness. But then even just then, if it's just boring, 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 staying, okay, I'm getting bored, and my mind's starting to wander, nope, nope, bring it back. Mind's starting to wander, oh, no, no, bring it back. So it's attention training, right? It really, truly is attention training. And so there have been numerous, numerous, numerous studies demonstrating that, yes, meditation, even over the course of 8 weeks, you can see improvements in attention and in this sort of metacognitive awareness. But then both of those spill over, because it turns out those are very important for other skills. So for instance, we're just finishing a study now demonstrating, and other people have shown this too, improvements in memory and also
Mm.
executive functioning. So being able to solve puzzles and stuff like this. So it really does have spillover benefits into other forms of cognition, which is important, right? Because as we get older, again, it's just like your muscles. You lose it or use it.
Mhm.
Use it or lose it. Yeah. And so we had that first study I told you about, the long-term meditators, they with the thicker cortex. It turns out that so as we get older, I think I said this, our brains shrink.
Yes.
And we had people 25 to 50 in that study. And what we showed is that in a couple of brain regions, the 50-year-olds had the same brain structure as the 25-year-olds, right? So the controls,
Wow.
the brain structure had fallen apart, or, it started to deteriorate. The 50-year-olds, the meditators still had the same structure. Not all of the brain, but just various discrete regions. But they were really
Uh-huh.
important regions. And so, uh, uh, so we did that study, and so then when we then repeated it again with people 50, I think it was 40 to 60 the second time,
Mhm.
and we gave them some cognition tests, and we showed not only was brain function preserved, but also their ability to do various cognitive tasks was also preserved.
Wow.
Now we've just finished a study now with people 65 to 80, and we put them through these 8-week programs, and we show improvements in their memory. Even when you're 65 years old, you can benefit.
Wow.
Yeah. And the benefits persist for 2 years. So it really
Wow.
does, you really can benefit.
Wow, that's so good to hear. I mean, hopefully I get to that age, but it's good knowing that all the time that I'm putting into a meditation practice, that it's definitely going to
Yeah.
be beneficial for me.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's so great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is
Um,
cumulative. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Actually,
and
because this is actually a question I get. It's like, how much do I have to practice? And the
oh
answer
yeah.
really, truly is cumulative. So many studies have shown over and over again, it's just total amount of time on the cushion, and so
Hmm.
every little bit you do. And there is definitely a little bit of data that, okay, well, for some people, for some symptoms and some, whatever conditions, more frequent is better. So even if it's just 5-10 minutes a day, that's
Hmm.
better. Others have shown that no, it's duration. Like you need to have at least 20, 30, 40 minutes a couple times a week. So,
Hmm.
but it's one of the, sort of like physical exercise. Do we all follow physical exercise recommendations perfectly? Some of us do, some of us don't. But any exercise is better than none. So even if you just get out twice a week, they recommend 3 times a week. But even if you get out once or twice a week, that's better than not at all. And so you just meditate when you can, and don't beat yourself up if you're not meeting the guidelines.
Yes. And I'm so grateful that you were able to continue that study because I believe I watched something where you mentioned that study that I think at that time you had just begun starting it, just begun it, and that I believe you said that it was like a 2 year long study or
Yeah,
something around that period of time. And
yeah.
I was really worried that because of the pandemic that's going on, that would have really disrupted the study and
It did.
um, you know
And luckily, we got enough data. Yeah, and so everyone finished the 1 year data, and about half the people finished their 2 year data. And so,
Wow.
we've got some information. We got a lot of information about 1 year, and then we also have quite a bit of data from 2 years. So it's pretty good.
Yes, that's such great news to hear because I was worried, that the study might have to have been restarted after
Oh
the
no.
pandemic, but thank God.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So my next question to you, kind of switching from going into like an older age, I would
Mhm.
like to ask you like what you think the future of meditation therapy looks like in terms of how beneficial it could be for children,
Mhm.
maybe even for students in varying levels of education,
Oh yeah.
how beneficial it is, and maybe if you could speak about what you think the future will look like once more information about these studies gets spread around, and how it becomes more blatantly obvious that we should be training our kids these exercises because there's a dramatic improvement in their cognitive ability even at an extremely early age.
Right. Yeah. So there have been a bunch of studies with kids, both with young kids and high school age kids. I must admit, I don't follow that research really, but I know, generally speaking, that yeah, they found. I don't know about cognitive benefits, but they definitely have found emotional benefits, and that's important.
Okay.
But
Hmm.
like I know for one thing that they show, and you can find video of this online, I'm pretty sure, is the way it's often used, because often little kids, they can't do the 20, 30, 40 minutes. You really can just
Hmm.
do like 5, maybe 10 minutes with them. Typically what they do is sort of like the kids go out and run around, for recess, and then they come back in, and then it's really hard to go from running around in recess to just sitting down. And so they
Hmm.
can use the meditation as sort of as a way to transition. And so they say, okay, let's start with a little yoga. And so that then really helps them. So they're training their mind. It's a little bit easier because they're doing yoga. So they're still moving, but they are training their attention. And then, okay, then they sit down and just watch their breath for a few minutes. And so they just get in like 5 minutes of practice, but then the kids are really, really focused and centered,
Hmm.
ready to learn, right? Versus if they're still from recess, then they're not really fully paying attention, right? And so it's just a way, or
Yes.
even if they're just transitioning between classes, it's sort of a way to say, okay, let's put that aside, and now we're going to come into this new space, and then we're going to focus. And so what they're finding is that sort of that you don't lose any time. It's just like 5 minutes, because what you lose in the time, you gain in the attention. So, and then I know, especially again, high school students, they've done a lot with emotion regulation, and because there's so much angst in the teenage years and whatnot. Really,
Yeah.
really useful. And like I know one study, the kids, they were saying that like they could tell that they were getting stressed out right before an exam, their exam be coming, and so
Hmm.
they had been randomized to the meditation class. So just spontaneously on their own, they were like going to the bathroom and just like sitting and meditating in the bathroom because they just need to
Yeah,
focus, just before, to like help calm themselves before an exam. There's also some really nice stories about people, like there's one guy who's a bit of a bully and he's sort of realizing he'd been a bully and sort of, stopped being a bully.
absolutely.
People saying, interpersonal interaction, these sorts of things. So it really helps. And those are important skills, just the self-regulation
Hmm.
skills and the emotion regulation skills. Those are
Hmm.
important skills for life, and so it's not,
Absolutely.
and I think that's really important is that, I mean, everyone's like, oh, performance. It's like, well, yeah, these other skills are important too. So,
Yeah.
so I know there's been a bunch of studies. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs and whatnot, but I do know, and there are definitely cognitive benefits in kids as well. But I don't know all the details.
Absolutely. Well, I can definitely, speak to that myself in terms of the emotional benefits that you would gain from that, because it's almost like you might become more aware of your feelings and understanding why you feel the way that you do. And that gives you the opportunity to maybe do something to change your feelings, which in turn make you feel better in general. And then you have less of that voice in your head that's just constantly nagging about, you should have did this, you should have said this to this person at this time.
Yeah,
And and you were really mean to this person saying what you did. So you deserve to feel bad about that. And it's like allowing yourself to become aware of those things, and then finding one way or another, either it be just letting it go or actually doing
hmm,
something about it. That is kind of like an indirect way of giving yourself more, excuse my phrasing here, but more brain power to focus on what is important in the moment. And
exactly.
and that could be, the college entry exams that you really need to do good on to go to the school that you want to go to, which
Exactly.
in large part will have a great influence in what your life turns out to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. Because really, there's more and more studies showing that, like in the corporate world, smart people are good, but the people who have the best social skills are the ones that really, and the emotion regulating skills, they're the ones who really are the stars often. And that,
mhm,
because if you've got someone who's really brilliant but really bad emotion skills, they tend to flop. So, you really,
mhm.
teamwork and, all these things. And so you really, it's the soft skills are often just as important, if not important than straight up intelligence. I mean, obviously the best is someone who's got both, but
Yes,
so it's
absolutely. And
work on.
something that's really interesting that's been happening to me through my practice is that you know, I kind of had a certain friend group when I was in high school, and just like cliques, just like most everybody experienced
Yeah.
when they're in high school around that time. And but now with my practice, I'm reaching out to people that, maybe I had certain interactions with that I wish I could have done differently. And I'm reaching out and I'm saying, like, hey, I'm sorry for this event that happened. And it
Nice.
really matters to me that I let you know that I'm apologizing, that I'm sincerely sorry for the way that I acted, because that's not who I am anymore. And I want to see you do good in your life, and I want you to be happy, and that's why I'm reaching out to you. And then it's like this effect happens where you start getting the hometown crowd now supporting you, whereas beforehand, if you were in my case, I had certain specific friends, but now my friend group is so much larger,
Mm,
and the support that I'm getting for the work that I'm doing is so like incredible that it just motivates me even more to do the best work that I can, and really just connect with the people like yourself who can make the largest impact in the world, because I'm beginning to realize that people are seeing what's going on. And, I get messages from time to time from people who say things like, you went through a pretty big transformation, and, I really support you. And just hearing that makes me, just want to give back. It makes me so happy that I feel like I don't need anything more than what I have. I just want
Hmm.
to give back to the world. And that's a huge, like, emotional benefit that I've gained from a meditation practice.
That's really
So,
cool. Really
thank
cool.
you, thank you, thank you. I mean, it feels very good. So another thing that has kind of been gaining in popularity recently, or within the last, you know, 5 years or so, is the rise of psychedelic therapy.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's have been numerous studies that have given a lot of confirmation, to the therapeutic potential that these psychedelic substances have. But my question to you is, for somebody like me who, I had a background with a lot of prescription drugs. I, spent a lot of my youth intoxicated. I, I really nowadays I tend more in the direction of choosing to not be intoxicated as much as possible because I just enjoy the clarity
Yeah.
of my own life the way that it is so much that I just don't feel like I want to move more in the direction of intoxication, whether that be, through prescription drugs, through alcohol, through psychedelics, whatever way that, intoxicating experience might come around to me, even if I'm being told that it will be beneficial in one way or another to go
Right.
through this. So I'm wondering, for people like me or for other people who just want to have the strong benefits, the therapeutic benefits of something like a psychedelic experience,
Mm-hmm.
but don't want to get intoxicated or want to just feel the security of being within their own body and being in control, would you say that a type of mindfulness meditation therapy could be a beneficial alternative for those people?
Yes, definitely. And actually, I want to say a couple things about psychedelics too. And I must admit, I mean, I know very little about psychedelics. I'm not endorsing them. My understand, but the thing is, this keeps coming up, right? Because everyone links the two together.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that the idea with this right now, what's being mostly studied and mostly endorsed, because there's more and more medical centers that are kind of sort of endorsing it or getting involved in it. The
Mm-hmm.
main interest is specifically in the context of trauma and
Mm-hmm.
severe treatment resistant depression. So this is not just, oh, hey, you got some depression, here, take some psychedelics. That's not the
Yeah.
idea. And also
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that there is, kind of one shot deals. And also
Mm-hmm.
it's done always in the context of therapy. And this is really, really, really important. I actually just saw
Mm-hmm.
something last week about this, a talk about it. The idea being that, say you are someone with trauma survivor, the idea would be that you would have several sessions, therapy sessions with a therapist first, and then during the ketamine or MDMA or I forget which one it was, that you'd have one single session, and it would really be focused around that traumatic event. That you would really
Mm-hmm.
try to use to resolve the issues around that trauma. And then afterwards, really exploring what you found out on the trip, with the mental health professional. And these are not just any mental health professionals; these are very highly trained mental health professionals that
Yes.
you know are used to working with people who've gone through these trips or whatever. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. So it's definitely not, hey, yeah, go pick some mushrooms and trip, and you're going to solve your problems. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what anyone that I know is saying. It's very much
Yes.
in the context of a very tightly controlled uh, um, system, right?
Uh-huh.
Right. So that's so for the people who are doing that, and my understanding is that for some people, some, but not all. This is the thing too. It's like all the headlines are yes, one treatment and everyone is saved. And it's like, well, no, no, no.
Mm-hmm.
Highly traumatized people. Not everyone gets
Yeah.
better. I've heard numerous stories about people who actually things get worse. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes one, and then sometimes no. Sometimes they need 4 or 5 or 10, and and I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be careful of the headlines, as I would say. I think there's a lot of hype right now. People really need to
Oh yeah.
do that. So, anyways, but then, obviously, so is meditation a complete alternative to all this? I would say yes and no. So there are some people who say, oh, yes, I'm going to start meditating, so therefore I no longer need my antidepressant medications, or I no longer need, my anti-anxiety
Hmm.
medication. I would not endorse that. I would
Right.
say start practicing and really,
Mhm.
because it takes a while to really develop the skills of mindfulness
Yeah.
and compassion and
Hmm.
whatnot. But then there's been a couple studies where, say, after a couple months, you start tapering your meds. And some
Hmm.
people are able to do it, and some people are not. I mean, I know some
Yes.
people have been meditating for years and are still on antidepressant medication because
Hmm.
different, our trauma histories are different, or our past lives, or not past lives, but our entire lives are different, and so some people have experienced a lot, and
Hmm.
people are better at handling their emotions, and so meditation definitely helps. But
Yes.
there's people who still need medications, but often they can
Hmm.
reduce dramatically. Most people can, but again, it may take 6 months, a year, 2 years, may take 5, 10 years, so there's no timeline at this point, and no, oh,
Hmm.
you're gonna be able to get off meds, and no, you're not gonna be able to get off meds. They're just,
Yeah.
you just have to sort of play with it. But basically everyone agrees that it's generally beneficial. So
That is great to
um
hear.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And I'm of course grateful that you mentioned how it's not a great idea to go from one day taking something like an antidepressant and then all of a sudden the next day, because you went to a meditation class, you think, I don't need these things anymore, and therefore I'm just going to go without it. Because if my understanding is correct, your body and your brain begins to form to these substances,
yep,
and therefore there needs to be a very gradual decline in your use in order to
yeah,
be safe, because there's any numerous amount of things that could happen. Same thing with alcoholism. If you drink a lot and you've been drinking so much that your body has formed to the alcohol, if you
yeah,
go without it, you could actually be hospitalized
yep,
simply for your decision to stop drinking.
yeah,
And so that's a really important point to make, and I'm glad
yeah,
that you brought that up.
yeah. And
And
definitely
for
done with a doctor who's ever prescribing. Let them know, they will help you taper, the whole thing, because
yes,
there is a science to it, to tapering people off of the meds. And also, and they sort of
yeah,
know what are the symptoms to look for, and the whole thing. So
yes. And I think you may or may not know more about this, but what do you think the availability of a therapeutic psychedelic experience is where you're being monitored by a medical professional? In my view, it seems to be something that there is a long waiting list, and that you might have to be like a subject of a study in order to actually have one of these types of things where you are being monitored by a medical professional.
right.
Um, is that your understanding, or are you aware of maybe other more open ways of doing that?
No, because so at this point, my understanding is that psychedelics are still a Schedule One drug.
Yes.
So the only clinical trials that are, so a garden variety doctor cannot do that. So all of
Hmm.
the clinical trials that are in progress right now have gotten, very, you had to go through a lot to get to there, right? So
Yes.
very close FDA approval and scrutiny and the whole thing. And so, yes, I think right now it's just clinical trials.
Yes.
There's a handful
Hmm.
of them. And I think most of them on ketamine. There's one right now that's doing MDMA for trauma.
Hmm.
And I don't know the details about it, but other than I know that's happening
Hmm.
right now. But yeah, so I think
Hmm.
it's not widely available right now, unfortunately.
Yes. And the reason why I asked that is because I know that there is a lot of psychedelic therapy that is going on in the United States that is not is under the radar right now.
Yeah,
And it's being controlled in large part, either there's a
there's no
varying
promotion
degree.
whatsoever. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's my. It's certainly not. approved by the American Medical Association. Let's put it that way.
Yes. And that's why like I wanted to speak to those people who may not even have the opportunity to be monitored by a medical professional, and they may not even be aware of things like the work that you are doing and how beneficial that these exercises have been shown, through
Yeah.
studies,
Yeah.
uh, to produce. And that, like where I'm from, I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama. There's a place
Mm-hmm.
called the Meditation Center of Alabama, and it's operated by a psychiatrist. And they're within the community of people who go there. There are many doctors, even retired doctors, who have spent their entire careers helping people, psychologists with exercises like this. And so there's like a community of people who you can trust, who
Yeah.
are credentialed experts,
Yes.
who would love to, help and speak with you. And then on top of it all, you're never feeling as if you're not in control. Like
Right.
you're never like intoxicated. So it's
Right.
all coming from within you,
Yes.
whatever it is that you want to ask help about, or whatever experiences that you might have, what you want to share. It's not something where it's kind of just the intoxicating experience in that you can't escape what's at the front of your attention, and that therefore
Right.
you feel as if you need to act on it. and
Right.
and if you're not around a community that you could really trust, that I agree with something that you said previously, that there have been numerous experiences that people have had where it's actually been bad, and
Yeah.
or that they've just really not been ready for it, and they were not surrounded by people who could really support them,
Right.
and that it may have even caused a lot of their trauma to
Yeah.
become worsened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
And so
I'm grateful. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's important that so marrying mindfulness and therapy has been around for about over 20 years at this point, almost 20, I'd say like 23 years at this point. And so there are, I'd say the vast majority of therapists and mental health professionals in the country at least know about mindfulness and have some experience with it. And a lot of them
Hmm.
practice themselves, not all of them, but many of them practice themselves. And so they
Hmm.
really get it. And so, yes. And so that's a nice thing is that, and lots of times, not lots of times, some of them will incorporate mindfulness in a therapy session, or, will again, work with you like, okay, this is what happened with your meditation. Okay, here, and so, and they really go hand in hand together because,
Hmm.
especially the mindfulness is really, because what it is you're being able to see your ideas and your thoughts. And
Yes.
so much of therapy is helping you do that. And so they're very synergistic, mindfulness and
Hmm.
therapy. And so,
Hmm.
and therapists are completely open to it. They're not going to be like, you meditate, none of them are like that. They,
Yeah.
really, they understand how powerful mindfulness is for self psychotherapy. So yeah, no, I definitely, yeah, if you're, especially for people who are not interested in medications, then yeah, mindfulness plus standard therapy is extremely powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to hear you say that, because that's, personally been something that's so beneficial for me. And to hear somebody, with your credentialed background,
Hmm.
confirm that those kinds of experiences is, it's, uh, uh, I mean, there's a lot that I could say about that, but it just makes me feel even better knowing that that I'm going down the right path with what
Yeah.
makes me feel the best in what I'm doing, and the
Yeah.
advice that I'm giving to people, and many times, or I should say all the time, that someone who's really in like a drug dependency state in one way or another, legally or illegally, I'll always recommend that they go speak to a doctor first,
Yeah.
because I don't have the medical background to honestly be able to give them
Hmm.
great advice in that. But I can, share my own personal experiences, and let them know, I've made a huge transformation in my life, and I know
Mm-hmm.
so many other people who have turned their lives around in a massive way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as we said earlier, by doing these exercises that look like you're doing nothing, but then
Right.
that turns into being this huge thing that happens.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Actually, one last thing I was
I'm,
going to
go
so
ahead.
a lot of today's like top meditation teachers, they're older, and so back in the 60s and early 70s, they were the tie-dyed and they were the hippies, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
I know a couple of them who are very open. Like there's one or two who are like, yeah, no, they spent most of the 70s, you know, on acid. I literally know two people who have, well, one person in particular who's really said that, who, and a couple others who, maybe not the whole 70s, but, they, had a significant drug history. And then, they
Uh-huh.
started meditation and, and they'll say like, yeah, like what they, what their meditation lessons go so much beyond anything they experienced on drugs. And that,
Oh yes.
yeah, no, and that they said like, yeah, that and like one of them I know even said that, he'd been clean for 20 years. And then one of his friends, they went to a party or something like that. And one of his friends had some. So he thought, okay, I'm just going to try to see what it's like. And he said, yeah, it was just like, it was a completely different experience because he meditated now. And it was just like, it just didn't have the same that it used to have.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, so it's definitely as wild and wonderful as it is. It's the meditation is actually even better. I mean, again, it doesn't seem like it at first because it's just like inhale, exhale. But when you really
Yeah,
develop it and develop it, you really do get experiences that are way beyond anything you can get with drugs.
absolutely. That's gosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that. That just it means so much. That's gosh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for
Cool.
saying that. Um, so so moving into kind of the future of your work and what
Mm-hmm.
that looks like. I know you were mentioning that you were finalizing this current study that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm wondering what future studies do you have in mind? What other aspects of meditation practice or the neuroscience of meditation or
Yeah.
just the science in general of meditation is interesting you to the point where you would like to do a study on that?
Yeah. So what people often talk about is that, oh my God, it completely changed my life. And we haven't been able to really well define that yet, but we're starting to get some
Hmm.
handles on it. And so trying to get a better sense of that, of like, okay, well, what does it mean to completely change your life? And so what are the positive benefits? So we know, okay, reduces depression and anxiety, but then there's these other positive qualities and they're kind of hard to define. And so trying to understand those better.
Yeah, that I agree would be very interesting to know. And whenever you figure out the parameters of that study and the timeline, I would love to speak with you again more about that, and I would love
Uh-huh.
to hear the results of that. I would love, if we could be the first people, besides the publishing of the paper, to really get the information out about those
Mm-hmm.
studies that you're doing, because we are a meditation magazine, and that's like what we focus on really, and particularly what I focus on is the
Mm-hmm.
scientific research. So I would absolutely love the opportunity to speak with you in on a future day whenever
Yeah.
that comes out.
All right, definitely. Well, let's stay tuned.
Yes, yes. So I think we just have a couple more questions here.
Uh-huh.
So rounding this out, what kind of books would you recommend to somebody who wants to understand more of the science or the neuroscience? I'm fascinated particularly by the neuroscience of meditation,
Yeah.
but would there be any books that you would recommend for somebody like me or anybody who'd like to know more about it?
Sure. Well, about the brain or about meditation or both?
Both, yes. I think, particularly for me, I would love to learn more about both. Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a really wonderful neuroscientist. Her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett.
Okay.
Really interesting research on how the mind works and how the brain works. And she has 2 books. The first one was The Hidden Life of the Brain, I think it was called. And then she has another one that just came out this month called Seven and a Half Lessons on the Brain or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the second one is very accessible, short chapters, the whole thing. I've only read little bits and pieces of it, but it seems really good.
Mm-hmm.
She has a couple YouTube videos and whatnot. Her big thing is the brain is not designed to think. The brain is designed to control the body. And when you really understand that, the whole like brain body interaction thing, it's like she
Mm-hmm.
has a whole new perspective on emotions. She's an emotion researcher, right? So that's,
Mm-hmm.
and just understanding that. The other thing is that the primary purpose of the brain is to predict what's going to happen next. And that's how we maintain our body, is by predicting what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
And gathering resources in order to anticipate what's going to happen, and in anticipation of what's going to happen next. And that often depression, anxiety, and whatnot is that the prediction system is messed up. And so what we think is happening with meditation is it's helping reset the predictions to a healthier
Mm.
way of being. So then, and it's both in the mind and in the body. Because so often, with depression, it's like, there's tiredness and there's, eating issues and all these body-based, same with anxiety, and there's lots of tension in the body. And so really learning how to reset that. So she's got, like really wonderful insights into that. So I highly recommend her book. Not a whole lot really about meditation in there per se, though. It's really more about, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is how the brain works.
Okay.
And then in terms of meditation and the brain, there's some books out there. I would say I would go with scientific articles over books.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
That's what I want. I want to know where can we find like the
yeah,
greatest possible information.
yeah. There's some good review articles. The last really big one, well, just in general, it's a couple years old now. It's 2015, 2016, I think, 2015, I think. It's Tang is the first author, Tang, and then Holzel, Holzel is the second author, and the third author is Posner, Posner. And it was a
Okay.
Nature Reviews Neuroscience, I believe, is the journal, and so that's a really good one. Again, it's a little older. But then, there's review articles on meditation on cognition, meditation on depression, meditation for this disease. And so those are going to be more up to date and a little bit more sciencey, I'd say. Because the books tend to be a little bit more theory, I would say, and less
Yeah.
science. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the scientific articles are so concise that there's no room for, nonsense to be in there. So,
Right, exactly. But then the books are too far the other way, versus I feel like the review articles are a little bit more a good balance between the two.
all right. That's great to hear. I'm definitely going to do some research coming up here for sure.
Cool.
So it looks like the final question that I have for you is where would you suggest people go if they, maybe if they just watched this interview or they read the article that would be written about this, and they may have never practiced meditation before, but they are seeing that there's something here and that they have an interest that is sparked. Is there anywhere or any person in particular or any kind of place that you would recommend people begin if they wanted to, begin taking up a practice like this?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, a couple different answers. So, if you're just kind of feeling kind of stressed and you want some stress reduction, because I always get questions about the apps, right? Because there's a bazillion
Hmm.
different apps, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just kind of stressed and you want some stress reduction and you just want to practice like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, the apps are a great place to start, you know,
Hmm.
because they're guided meditations, especially for beginners, guided meditations are fantastic, because you really need help getting focused, and also it gives you a little bit of the theory and a little bit of a little bit of guidance, right? Um,
Hmm.
but then if you're really feeling like you're someone who has depression or anxiety and you've got a little bit more going on in terms of the psychological, then
Hmm.
I would definitely start with one of these 8-week programs. So because often they're led by mental health providers, not always, but often.
Hmm.
And some of them, the original was mindfulness-based stress reduction, but now they have them for every condition you can think of. So there is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for anxiety, for this disease, for that disease, for eating disorders. There's for pretty much
Hmm.
everything. There is an 8-week mindfulness program. And it's nice because a lot of them combine both mindfulness meditation and standard psychotherapy elements. So you sort of get the best of both
Hmm.
worlds, right? So those are really fantastic programs. Plus, then you again get a little bit of guidance from a teacher and from a mental health provider. Um, then for people who are perhaps more interested in like the spiritual development, you definitely need a teacher. And also
Hmm.
just for people who want to do more than say 5-10 minutes a day, I would strongly recommend working with a real life teacher. Just because what's
Hmm.
going to happen is that, you're going to start thinking like, well, is this right? And, your mind's going to start doing things that you're not used to. And you need
Hmm.
to talk to that understands. And so you can say, that the teacher will say to you like, okay, well, what's happening to your practice? So,
Hmm.
okay, well, you're experiencing this, you're experiencing that. And okay, here, try this, modify this a bit. So they can really, it's sort of like a coach, they can really guide you a bit more.
Hmm.
So, especially, yeah, for someone who's really going to get serious about meditation practice, I would definitely recommend a live teacher.
That's great to hear. And also, I'm not sure if you're aware of these technologies that are coming out.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
there's like something called the Muse Meditation
Yep.
headset,
Yep.
which
Yep.
measures, I think it's like an EEG scan
Yep.
of your brain while you're meditating,
Yep.
and there's a lot of interesting things that I've done with that. I've actually personally I've used something like that, and I guess you could say, I mean, I don't know if the degree of measurement with these technologies currently is apt to what you would experience if you were actually being studied in a hospital.
No, no.
But yeah, yeah,
I
absolutely
mean,
not.
really,
Yeah,
it's good enough. So,
yeah.
yeah, so I feel like those are basically the same as the apps. I mean, and actually,
Hmm.
yeah, I've got very mixed feelings about those things. I mean, I think
Okay.
they're good. They can be useful for beginners because lots of times beginners
Uh-huh.
don't really know what they're doing, and it's hard even as a teacher to know what exactly is this person doing. And so
Hmm.
the app, the feedback, they call neurofeedback, right? In the muses with
Hmm.
this, and so they're good, and it sort of helps you understand. Okay, yeah, no, this way of practicing is not useful. This way, this is the right way to practice, right? So it gives you a sense of
Hmm.
that. But then beyond that, yeah, I think most people say like, yeah, no, you don't want. It's not meant for like long term use. It really is much
Yeah.
more. Okay, get you going, get you started, and then get off and just practice on your own. Um,
Hmm.
and also, again, for safety reasons, because getting back to the trauma. So, I mean, some people have trauma with a capital T,
Hmm. Yes.
abuse, combat, whatever. But all of us have little traumas,
Hmm.
and they come up when you start practicing. Which is
Yeah.
sort of maybe sitting there, and all of a sudden, like something that happened back when you're in fifth grade will pop up,
Yeah.
and no big deal. But it's one of the things where if you're just practicing on your own, like your subconscious is wise. Your subconscious is very wise. Your subconscious will show you things when you're ready, right? It won't show
Hmm.
you what you're ready for the most part. Whereas the muse, it kind of, and these other ones, they're kind of forcing you into these deeper states.
Mm. I
And
see.
and so if you're not ready, and so that could like
Yeah.
be kind of traumatizing, sort of like with the
Yeah.
psychedelics. It's sort of like, yeah, it's sort of so I would recommend, again, so a little bit at the beginning if you want, if it's interesting to you, great, but other than that, I would not get too involved with them.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, especially from somebody who has the neuroscience background that you have. You're very aware of all the science that goes into these technologies, which is, I mean, it's so incredible that your area of profession is in this area because I
Yeah.
mean, kind of like how meditation is what they call a meta skill. So it's like when you understand meditation, you begin to understand and you can learn better almost anything else that you are doing. it's kind of
Yeah.
like neuroscience is a, a meta subject where if you understand how the brain works, that it helps you to understand other things better because you're kind of understanding like the central location of where a lot of everything, takes place,
Yeah.
and where a lot of the influences that determine how we feel and the decisions that we make,
Mhm.
where that all begins, and how that creates an influence in our lives.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and answering these questions, because I've had these questions for years, and to be in a position where I can, I can ask you and help you out, and really get more information about the work that you are doing out into the world. It makes me just so incredibly happy with how I'm spending my life, and I feel so much like it's a gift to be, having this conversation with you. It's like I was saying before we began, it's a true honor to be speaking with you. So
Well,
thank
I'm
you
glad.
again.
I'm glad. Yeah. So hopefully it'll help some people out there.
Yes, yes, and we'll definitely talk again soon.
Great. Thanks for having
All
me.
righty.